The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning into another edition of Insights. I'm your host, Star Connor, and I am here with Hope Shores Alliance, Janine and Jillian. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about a touchy topic, of course, sexual assault. It's being raised here in Northeast Michigan, like it's increasing, and I just wanted to, know the difference. Like, there's a lot of issues when it comes to sexual assault and the difference in rape. Can y'all both or one of y'all explain the difference between the two?
Sure. I think sexual assault and rape are the same thing definition-wise. It would be without consent, having taking a sexual experience. But legally, there is no rape in Michigan. Legal definition is sexual assault.
Okay, now working with your group and your organization, what's the process when someone comes to you and say they have been sexually assaulted?
Well, there's no straightforward way for that process to kind of work or to go through that process, but in Northeast Michigan we've taken a really proactive approach to making sure that survivors are treated with dignity and respect. They've obviously had their bodily autonomy stripped away from them in the most intrusive way possible. So we've created something called the Sexual Assault Response Team in Northeast Michigan, and we work with our community partners, including prosecution, law enforcement, hospital staff, and ourselves to make sure that the experience for survivors is as trauma-informed and careful and just as trauma-informed as possible. So when somebody, it kind of depends where they present themselves and say, I've been sexually assaulted, that can look different. They can approach us first, they can approach law enforcement first, maybe go to the hospital first, and it looks different depending on what they choose to do. But if they, generally, where we're called out most is the hospital. Someone will present to the hospital and let them know that this has happened to them, and then there's a process set in place where we dispatch law enforcement ourselves, and they can choose whether or not they want to receive the forensic exam.
Okay. Do you feel like a victim comes to you first? I know there's a hotline that they call. Do you feel like a victim will turn to you versus the hospital first, or how has it been here in this area?
Well, and it's important to note, I mean, as Jillian was saying, there's no wrong way to be a survivor of sexual assault. Unfortunately, some people didn't know or weren't given resources and weren't able to go to a hospital within 72 hours. We're working with survivors who've come to us that it's been years, so going to the hospital isn't necessarily a step. For many sexual assault survivors, when they're disclosing, it's kind of they dip a toe in the water and see what happens. That's why it's so important for us to reach out to schools and other organizations, because anybody could receive a disclosure from a friend, a family member. But within the SART, I think the sexual assault response team that Jillian was talking about, I think many of those are coming from the hospital. Some of those are coming from law enforcement. Very few start with us that are an active, could be eligible for a sexual assault exam.
Yeah, we generally come in after they've presented to either of those places and help as their advocate, help that process, just so that they're making informed decisions and that they understand their rights as a victim of a violent crime. And so just letting them know things like they have 120 hours to get the exam done, and that they can choose whether or not they want to turn it over to law enforcement at that time, that they don't have to do that, that they have up to a year to decide what to do with that forensic exam. There's lots of little pieces that we want to make sure that survivors have all of the information as they're making these really critical decisions.
Okay, and talking about the exam, a lot of people don't understand, like, what is that? Like, you go in, you tell someone you've been sexually assaulted or raped, and, I've heard that word too. Like, what can they expect from that exam? Like, I know y'all probably had to go yourselves and watch someone get examined. So what can they expect during that exam?
I think as a community and as those community partners we were just discussing, we've all worked to train ourselves to become more trauma informed. So first of all, they can expect to be treated with as much dignity as that we've been able to establish. When they go there, it kind of looks different depending on what they want. So they're in control of the process beyond that point. So they're offered the forensic exam. They can choose whether or not to get that, or if they just want to receive medical care for any injuries that might have been sustained during the assault, or if they choose to get the exam. The nurse can walk step by step through what that's going to look like and read their rights. And one of the great things about the exam is that there's quite a bit to it, but survivor has total, complete control over which parts of that exam that they opt into. So the nurse will say, at this point, this is what I can do, and then survivor can say, well, I don't really want to participate in that part of the exam, and just move on to other parts that they are more comfortable with. And overall, it's just making sure that we, step by step, give that bodily autonomy back to that survivor, and that they have control over that process.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's important just to note that there is a collection, an evidence collection, but also safety is so important. Getting a medical exam, there are so many different drugs that can be given to prevent STIs, STDs. When you're sexually assaulted, your brain takes over. You could have bleeding and tearing that you don't know about. So it kind of should be treated as two separate things. If somebody isn't interested in the evidence collection, we still strongly would suggest that they get that medical care that's part of the exam.
Okay, now when you talk about evidence collection, does that include the rape kit?
Yes.
Okay, okay, I just wanted to talk about that. And you know, in the state period, I know down in Detroit, they're behind a little bit in the rape kit process. And I just wanted to know, for our area, how are we doing collectively with making sure those victims get taken care of with their own rape kit?
Yeah, that's one of the great things about the SART team, or the Sexual Assault Response Team, is that we're proactively trying to make sure that we're communicating with survivors on a more regular and consistent basis, so that they're kept completely in the loop when it comes to their particular case. It's just the reality of the forensic exams, the sexual assault forensic exams, that they can take quite a while to come back after the DNA is collected. And so usually we say at least 6 months before it comes back. And so in that sense, it can feel like we're behind or we're taking a long time, but one of the great things about that window, not that that's a great thing, because when you've been sexually assaulted, you want things to move generally, but it provides an opportunity for there to be a very thorough investigation regarding what occurred to them. And so making sure that while we're waiting for those results to come back, we're doing everything else we can to have a solid investigation.
And I mean, the tragedy of finding all of those kits that were never tested in Detroit, a warehouse full, that is an upsetting thing that unfortunately our area is known for, but it also was leading the charge in creating laws. Now a survivor, there's so many laws in place that if they don't want to move forward and they want the hospital to hold on to the kit, the hospital legally is going to do that. Same with if law enforcement has it. There's so much a part of what's going on each step. So I just think it's important that we don't just acknowledge our shameful past, but what we've done to better ourselves and kind of take charge nationally.
Yeah, and a piece of that, just quickly too, is I think it's important to know that survivors will never have to pay for their forensic exam. That is not something that they'll ever have to do. So, and the nurse will ask about insurances and making sure that if your abuser is on the same insurance and you don't want them to know that you've gotten that forensic exam, that your insurance won't be billed. So they're very careful, and I think a lot of that is in response to what happened with the forensic exams down in Detroit.
Okay, well, thank you both ladies for all the information. And when we come back to Insights, we'll take a look at an actual rape kit. Welcome back to Insights. I'm your host, Star Connor, and once again, I am here with Hope Shores Alliance, Janine and Jillian, and we were discussing the rape kit exam. Just go a little bit about that process, like over what you do as, you know, helping victims at Hope Shores Alliance.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is what an evidence collection kit looks like. And kind of what we said earlier, a kit is finished being collected as soon as the survivor says it's finished. So we only need one thing in this kit, and it could be shipped off and tested, and it doesn't have to be complete. So it's a thorough exam, but you can opt out of any, and that's our job as advocates, is to remind survivors that they don't necessarily have to participate in any or all of this. But yeah, if you, it looks pretty unintimidating. It's just a small white box. And then when you open it up, this is probably the most important part of this exam, is the information for survivors, because as they're making these critical decisions, we want them to make sure that they have all the information they need or could possibly want. And so in addition to this, they get a victim's rights brochure and our brochure and more information about follow-up care after an assault occurs. And then there's a step-by-step instruction thing for the nurses, so that we're careful to make sure that we don't miss any information, that the survivor can choose how they approach it and if they release it. Just making sure that we're thorough with that process.
And it's uniform.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's been my experience that forensic nurses in our area will try to kind of have themselves set up to keep everything, because there, as you can see, there's a lot of different pieces of evidence that can be collected if a survivor so chooses. It can be difficult trying to keep everything tidy and in order, and it's been my experience. The hospital does an amazing job, and a lot of that is setting themselves up for success early on. Pacing, that's a huge part of what we do, is making sure we're at a pace that's comfortable for the survivor, as well as the person performing the exam.
Okay, now besides the exam, I know you deal a lot with shelter finding for the victims and providing them help with that as well. How does that work? Sometimes you have to put them up in a safe house or something like that. So how does that work?
We have this really incredible resource called the Safe House, and that's just, I'm so grateful we have it, because it's perfect for those crisis situations. After an assault occurs, there's obviously a lack of feeling safe. And so making sure that that is always our number one priority, is making sure that the survivors we're working with are safe and they have a safe place to rest after that occurred to them. So we work with, we might transport them there, or law enforcement, whatever that looks like in that particular instance, brings them into our safe house. And from that point forward, we just discuss options with them. We lay out every option that's available to them in terms of longer term housing, if they need our help with that, maybe refer them to other organizations. We have our own housing program as well, with a certain number of units, and just making sure that they get into a home that's safe for them.
Okay.
And there's very few times is it very cookie cutter, everything's the same. So we try to be prepared and have, gas money, ask what they have to do next, who came with them, because I wouldn't have thought it until I started doing this work, but life doesn't stop just because violence entered your life. So I've worked on SART cases where they had family members or their children at the hospital. So we try to make sure that that there's an advocate for them too, transportation. There's all sorts of immediate needs, and then of course Hope Shores Alliance works with people through their lifetime when they need us. So that could be, through the trial, which could, take much longer than anybody would like, and beyond.
Would you say you work more with younger victims or older victims? Because I know sexually assaults, a baby can be sexually assaulted. I hate to be graphic like that, but would you say you've worked more with younger or older victims here in Northeast Michigan?
I think it's important that we always look at this from the lens of the perpetrators of these crimes, the rapists, the abusers. These are people who want to hurt somebody and they want to get away with it. So they're going to go to our most vulnerable populations. So I think statistics are like on a national average, we're going to see, college age around there. But we are different than other places. We might be seeing more elderly people who are very vulnerable. As you had said earlier about our numbers increasing, I don't know if there's necessarily more sexual assaults. It's really easy to make that connection. I think maybe we're all just doing a better job. The fact that you asked us here is huge. It gets that word out that this thing that happened to me, I don't know if I can call it rape, but I know it was weird. So maybe I'm going to call that hotline and talk to somebody and find out. I genuinely hope that businesses, places, especially those who are working with children, who are working with older adults, are making sure that they have policies in place so that people know if they are unfortunately ever the victim of a crime like sexual assault, they know that they can go to a supervisor, they'll be believed, they'll be listened to, and perpetrators aren't welcome in our community. So that's another thing I definitely hope people think about. What is our plan if there is an assault? Are we doing things to prevent that? Making sure that we have policies about if children are allowed to be alone with an adult, what does that look like? Things like that.
Now, in Northeast Michigan, or period, a lot of people think victims are mostly female, but it can be a male too as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, our organization works with male, female, or anywhere along that spectrum, as well as any age, young children up to older adults, secondary and primary survivors. So it can be family members of somebody who's been assaulted, and all of our services are free and confidential, but we try to cover as much of the spectrum as we possibly can when it comes to providing these services for survivors.
And what are some 2019 goals for Hope Shores Alliance?
Yeah, we're really excited moving into the future because, like Janine mentioned, just because we're seeing an increase in numbers. For example, our sexual assault services have increased about 43%, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's happening more, just that people are accessing it at a higher rate. So we want to continue to get the word out about what resources are available to survivors, and we're just totally revitalizing our sexual assault program in general, adding an additional counselor, an additional advocate, and just trying to be really proactive about communicating with our awesome community partners, continuing to form that partnership at a higher rate, increase communication, and working with survivors in a really trauma-informed, dignified way.
Did you want to add?
Well, I mean, just realistically, I know a lot of people still call us Shelter. We were Shelter Incorporated. We have switched to Hope Shores Alliance. It's a real concerted effort because, as you mentioned, unfortunately, when we're talking about sexual assault and men, most people are thinking, oh, the ones who do that to women. And it's just not true. Anybody can be a victim. It requires you being vulnerable, and we're all vulnerable at some point in our lives. So that's always been a goal, is for us to be looked at as Hope Shores, working with survivors of sexual, domestic, dating violence, and stalking. And it doesn't matter what package your body comes in. If you identify as a victim of any of those, then we're here to work with you. Our services are free and they're confidential. So thank you for helping us with our 2019 goal.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, and I'm glad we got this topic out, in Insights. And I want to appreciate and thank you both for stopping by on a sensitive subject. And I hope that here in Northeast Michigan, everything gets better with the cases, and we move forward and help these victims out.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Welcome back to Insights. I'm your host, Star Connor, and I am here with Officer Melberg. I want to talk to you and your part about sexual assault. Dealing with cases like that, what role would you say you play?
The role that I play is, it depends on when it gets reported, such as if a victim went up to the ER, they'd contact us if they want to talk to us, or they want to turn over the kit to us. We can meet them then and talk to them, or not, or we'll leave our card and request if they change their mind to talk to us, or they come down to the station and they want to report it. So it starts with us, and from there we will activate SART and we'll get an advocate to come in and sit with us.
Okay. Normally, when it comes to sexual assault cases and the officer's standpoint of view and like area of that, how often do y'all train for a situation like that?
We do yearly trainings that relate to that topic or on that topic.
Looking at some cases already, how many cases would you say you're currently working on?
Currently I have 2. Right now it's just when the victim wants to come forward, it's up to them.
And when they come forward, would you say you deal with someone that comes forth right away, or some victims they wait days, right? Or you advise them to come forth early.
We hope that they, when they're ready, when they're comfortable to talk about it, they're more than welcome to come in. Or if they need it, you have 5 days to do a kit to collect that evidence. We just suggest as soon as it happens, go into the ER, talk to them, let them know. You don't have to talk to us right away, but we're here to help.
Mm-hmm. And would you say there's a increase in sexual assault in our area?
In our area, I would say there's more victims coming forward.
Why do you think they're finally coming forward?
I feel that they're feeling more comfortable. We're trying to do more public relations, officers in the community with the public, so I think they're coming more comfortable knowing that we're here to help them.
Mm-hmm. And you as a woman, have you noticed more sexual assault cases in females or males in our area when you're working on a case? I know you have to work on those cases, so would you say there's more female assault cases or male assault cases that you've had to endure?
More female at the moment, but males are victims just as well. We just want them to feel more comfortable as well. They don't have to talk to me specifically. If they feel comfortable talking to a male, they can. It's their choice who they want to talk to.
In our area, what do you see more of? Like younger cases like teens or more elderly being assaulted?
More teens, but it doesn't mean elderly aren't being as well. It's just I think the teens are more willing to report at the moment, and they feel more comfortable with us.
Describe, I guess, one case that you can talk about safely. How long was the process, and how long did that case happen to take for you to do?
I had one not too long ago. I investigated over a year. Actually, there was 2 other officers that were involved. I can say we had 3 victims, and then there was 1 suspect. After we all were grouped together, we were able to work together on it and collect the evidence that was necessary. We turned it over to the prosecutor's office, and we were able to convict him, and he actually went to prison not too long ago on those charges.
Okay. Now, if someone is assaulted, how do you encourage them to, come forth? And, it's a horrific situation, but, when you're dealing with that, how do you, I guess, help encourage them to let them know that they're going to be okay when you're working with a victim?
What we do is we team up with Hope Shores. We'll contact them. Well, first we'll ask the victim, hey, what Hope Shores is, explain what they do, what their role is, and we'll ask them, can I contact them? Would you like them in the room with us, or would you like their services? We try to strongly encourage that, and if they confirm they're okay with it and they'd like us to, we'll go call them, and they'll come and they'll sit with us, and they offer different services, more than what we can offer at the moment, but we try to go through that process and keep them updated through the investigation.
And I guess, personally, how do you deal with things like this, knowing that sexual assault is like something that is just a horrific thing in the situation? When you go home at night, after dealing with a situation like that, as an officer, how do you deal with your emotions, knowing that you've helped someone, hopefully, overcome their situation?
My thing is I want to be there for them, help them. I know it's a hard place they're at. That's what we're here for. We want to make them feel as comfortable, make them feel safe. You should always feel safe, no matter what.
Sexual assault is never okay. If you or someone you know needs help, please contact Hope Shores Alliance at 1-800-396-9129 or contact your local law enforcement. For Insights, I'm your host, Star Connor.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.
The furniture and set design for this episode of Insights is provided by Young Appliance Art Van Furniture on US 23 South, Alpena.